Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Man, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm very happy that to be your first Sunday guest.
The first ever one, and if you weren't on the road, you'd have been on for the entire programme. Gilad, this is absolutely serious. Andrew Gilligan writing with Patrick Sawyer, Tim Ross and Robert Mendick in the Sunday Telegraph today has basically put forward what he describes as a dossier of events, of things that have happened in the recent past, which he says proves that anti-Semitism is endemic in the Labour Party. And just before you come in and I let you get on with it, he talks about council leaders sharing Facebook posts comparing Israel to ISIS. Jeremy Corbyn asking why an anti-Semitic mural in East London should be taken down. Jeremy Corbyn attended events in the past run by self-confessed Holocaust denier Paul Eisen long after his views had become clear. Now, George Galloway, the Mayor of London candidate, he seems to believe, Galloway, that this is all about Jeremy Corbyn and undermining him and the Labour Party. But I don't buy that for a minute. I believe it's more sinister. What are your thoughts, my friend?
No, to start with, you know, there are, you know, when you start to understand Jewish culture, you understand that within the context of Jewish culture, there is a very clear notion of Sabbath Goy. Sabbath Goy, originally from a Judaic perspective, is the person who is taking care on the Sabbath, on Saturday, where Jews, the holy day for the Jews, of all those things that Jews cannot do. He turns the light off, he turns the light on, he turns the oven on, and so on and so on. In modern politics, what the Sabbath Goy is the person, the Gentile, who is willing to take care of all the whims of or the political interests of the Jews. So Andrew Gilligan is definitely a classic case of a Sabbath Goy. A few days ago, we saw John Mann, a repulsive Sabbath Goy, who was misbehaving, shouting at Ken Livingstone, you know, and actually these people are introducing a very dangerous type of politics and behavior to Western culture. And this is something that nobody really speaks about, and that is why it was very important for me to talk to you and to anyone else, actually. 3 days ago, we learned that Ken Livingstone was expelled, or suspended, actually, right to say, suspended from the Labour Party for telling the absolute truth. Every person, both Zionist and anti-Zionist and academics, know that there was an extensive collaboration between the National Socialist, German National Socialist regime and the Zionist institutions as early as 1933, which is the transfer agreement. And by the way, it didn't end there. Even as late as 1944, we know about the Katzner affair, where Eichmann offered Rudolf Katzner, the Hungarian Zionist, the Jewish leader, to let 1 million Jews out of Hungary, and in return for 2,000 lorries. The German army was defeated at the time; they were withdrawing, and they needed some support. And it's a very interesting affair that led to an assassination in Israel. You know, all those issues are well established. Now, what is very interesting...
Why are they so worried about it, Gilad? Why are the Israeli lobby in this country so worried about people finding out that there was collaboration to get... Because you could argue this. You could say, well, you know, kudos to those Zionists in Germany who were still trying to get Jews out of Germany and into Palestine despite what Hitler was doing. Why are they so scared of this coming out?
To start with, this is a very interesting, and this is the next thing that we must talk about. Because for many years, the Jewish institutions worked very hard to conceal the Avara agreement, to conceal the Katzner affair, because these affairs are contradicting our Holocaust religion take on the Holocaust. So if we want to see Hitler as the number one evil man, and the Nazi regime is the ultimate form of racism, blah, 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 then it's quite hard to encompass the thought that the Zionist federations actually worked with Hitler. We have the German chief rabbi who actually wrote to Hitler. He was a Zionist. He said, we have a lot in common. You believe in race. We, the Jews, believe in race. You believe in nation. We believe in nation. We should collaborate rather than working against each other. Those issues do not fit with the Holocaust religion. Now, the difference...
No, they did. Now, listen, I'm not going to contradict you because you're right. But at the same time, the rabbi you mentioned might not have been aware, Gilad. I mean, these are different times. You and I can connect, electronically overnight and set up a conversation like this. But maybe these guys didn't realise that the Nazis were exterminating the sick, the disabled, people born with disabilities, anybody they didn't like. I mean, they might have said we have a lot in common, but ultimately, whoever funded Hitler, and we might come to that because a lot of these Zionists had they had their money invested in this man. He was a madman and he was hell-bent on killing people.
I don't want to turn it into a discussion about Hitler because...
No, neither do I, to be fair.
No, because we are in the current environment, we are not qualified, actually, to talk about Hitler or that regime in a frank manner, because there are too many things that we are not allowed to do. Now, why we are not allowed to do them? Because we are removed now from talking about truthfulness, about the truth, about historical facts. Why we are not allowed to talk about historical facts? Because these facts are apparently offensive to some Jews. Now, the issue here, the conclusion that one must draw here is that there is a clear discrepancy between the culture that is pushed by these Jewish oligarchs, whether it is Lord Levi or this our Donald Trump here, Mr. Sugar, Lord Sugar, or who is not in the Labour Party, or Michael Foster, who talk openly. We don't want anyone to say bad things about Israel or looking into our Holocaust or looking our history. This kind of politics contradicts completely the values of Western freedom. And what seems to me is that form of Jewish power. I wrote a book about Jewish power. A lot of people were upset with me. No one said that I said anything wrong.
No, but this is hilarious. I love this. You weren't criticised for the content. You were criticised for saying it.
For saying
Is that right?
Now, if Jewish power was a vague concept, it is not vague anymore. When we see John Mann behave like a hooligan, in the BBC building.
Disgusting, wasn't it?
For the Jews, openly, the Jewish power is in front of our eyes.
Can I ask you a question on this?
Yeah.
You and I have spoken so many times before. I came across a book David wrote years ago called "And the Truth Shall Set You Free." And recently, a book called The Nazi Roots of the Brussels European Union has come out in the last few years. I was given a copy of it recently, and it corroborates much, if not all, of what David says in and the truth shall set you free. I believe, Gilad, and I'm going to shut up, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I believe the real terror here for the Zionist agenda is that people understand that some of the people responsible for creating the State of Israel, those who saw 800,000 Palestinians, indigenous people, basically torn away from their land in the period 1947 to 1949, they are terrified that people find out that these people were responsible for funding, arming, and ultimately supporting the Nazi Party and Hitler because they wanted to control a post-Second World War with Hitler in charge. The same people. Now, this is historically true. I think that has a lot to do with it. They don't want people ever finding that out. I mean, Jewish people, can you imagine if you were a Jewish man or woman and your uncle or aunt or your mother was killed at Auschwitz or wherever, and you find out that some of the fathers of Zionism, of the Jewish project, had a hand in that? I believe that implicitly. What do you say to that?
I totally agree. And this is exactly why the Holocaust is handled as a religion rather than as an historic chapter. This is the issue. When it comes to religion, you then can put aside logic and rationality, and you have to accept some fundamentals. And this is exactly what the Jewish lobby is pushing. There is clear evidence of Ben-Gurion, who turned to be later the Prime Minister of Israel, handling and actually prime responsible for the destruction of Hungarian Jews because he didn't want to trade with Eichmann along the Katzner affair, and we don't have much time to look into it, but your listeners can look Katzner affair and they will find all the information for themselves.
I have a question for you, by the way. We've got another 3 minutes before, and I'm going to give you the last word. Let's because the European Union project is so important to the Zionist agenda and to the one world government agenda. And I know you have read and have studied this as well as anybody that I've ever come across. I want to get you on for an hour the week after next to come on the radio show and have a good go at this, because none of this can be criticised. You know that I'm a history graduate, although I was taught much of the history I was taught at second and third level turned out to be lies. When I went looking for myself, I found all sorts of interesting things. This is absolutely the crux of it. You know, they cannot have, because Jewish men and women are the same as you and me. They are born into slavery the same as you and me. They don't understand it.
I think that you're right.
Yeah.
But she doesn't look the same as you. But
yeah.
All right, let me make it very short because we have only 1 minute and I can sum it into 1 minute.
Go ahead, my friend.
Enjoy yourself. Now, here it how it goes. It is very simple. In the 19th century, we see the rise of European nationalist movement. It starts in France and then 1970 in Germany and Italy and so on and so on. Britain become more nationalist. And there are two ideologies that are set to destroy nationalism. One ideology is global capitalism. This is something that initially starts by the, let's say, Rothschild family, House of Rothschild. They realize that they can operate from different capitals and so on and so on. The other ideology is Bolshevism. Both global capitalism and Bolshevism are cosmopolitan movements. They are movements that goes beyond borders and national states. The issue here is this: both ideologies, both perceptions, both precepts are Jewish, fundamentally Jewish, or led by Jews. When it comes to Bolshevism, we can start with Marx and then a chain of good-willing Jews to Trotsky. Some people who may even say Lenin. And capitalism, we don't have to even talk about the overrepresentation of Jews leading this phenomenon. And this is quite devastating because Hitler, whether we like him or not, which is a different question, so that there is kind of the capitalism and Bolshevism are the two sides of the same coin, and this is where he decided to fight this phenomenon. Now, this is quite devastating thought because we were born into a split world, into a Cold War, into a world that was convinced that capitalism and Bolshevism are the ultimate enemies. Suddenly, here we are in the 21st century, we look backward and said, were they? Maybe not. Maybe it's a just internal Jewish conflict. Now, you ask yourself, how many people died in this conflict in the last century?
It's innumerable, yeah. It's innumerable, yeah.
This is what I call truthfulness. To be a Western person, and I'm really trying, my roots are not in the West, but I came to live here. I immigrated to Britain because I want to live in the West. To live in the West, to be a Western person, is to accept the notion of freedom, to be tolerant even if someone doesn't like you. If you are a Jew and someone doesn't like you, you listen and you address the problem and you look in the mirror. And I'll tell you something else. The Zionists were the first Jews who look in the mirror and they said, actually, there is a valid argument against us. This is why I have a lot of admiration to early Zionism. They were the first Jews who were brave enough to look in the mirror, but the project didn't work out because the people that were involved in making into reality were the Jews themselves.
We'll pick this up again in a couple of weeks when you're off the road for a couple of days, Gilad. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, mate. People can go to gilad.co.uk where there are dozens and dozens of thought-provoking and brilliantly researched articles. Continued success with the tour. Next time, the very next time you're anywhere near us here in Manchester, I can't wait to see you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Gilad.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.